Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? We've had a pretty amazing expo going on here. We are winding things down. My name's David Reichard, and I've spent 30 years behind the wheel of these Class 8 trucks. I've racked up some 2.5 million miles, and I've pretty much spaced it out pretty evenly over the course of my career, over the road, some regional, some local routes that I've run. But 2.5 million miles is where I sit. I've hauled just about every kind of trailer that is out there: vans, flatbeds, dump boxes, bull hauler for a little while, cars, tanker. I've done oversized, I've done hazmat. I've seen a lot of stuff out there over the years, and I will say the career for me has been pretty amazing. I love being a professional driver, and I hope that some of you can catch that same bug that I have, and that passion for being a professional driver and for understanding who we represent when we're out there behind the wheel. Today I want to talk a little bit about something that if you are a company owner or a fleet owner, maybe even a dispatcher, something that's possibly keeping you up overnight, and that's this problem that we have with driver retention. We're going to look at that a little bit today. We're going to also look at why it is that sometimes drivers really leave. We know what the surface area or surface reasons are oftentimes, but we need to dig down a little bit and just see what it is that causes these drivers to just suddenly up and ghost us. And I want you to ultimately, especially if you are a fleet owner, understand what is that costing you to replace that driver. Because that adds up. That's money that you are not able to recoup very quickly. So I want us to look at that today, and I want to give you the ability and the confidence to know that there's tools that you can access to retain the good drivers that you already have, and just continue to invest in those drivers and improve them and their time while they are with you. Hopefully by the time we're done here today, you're going to have a framework that you can actually build on and not just have some quick fixes. Does that sound like something we're all in store for here? All right, let's move on. So before I get into the actual tools that we're going to be using, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my story and why it is that I care about this work. So I've been a driver since 1991. Hauled all kinds of trailers, been in all kinds of weather conditions that you can imagine. Snow, ice in the Northeast. Probably one of my most favorite stories was when I was hauling cars. Showed up to upstate New York after they had just had the auction 2 days earlier and was handed a stack of tickets that had 12 cars. They'd gotten 3.5 feet of snow. I look out in the lot and all I have is white humps. I'm looking for a blue Corolla. Good luck finding that up there. So I've seen a lot, I've been through a lot, and even with those setbacks, I still love the profession of being a driver and being able to be out there. I've also experienced divorce in my life, not because of trucking, but because everything else that goes along with that difficulty of being home and being present, but yet being gone to make a living to support the family that I love so much. And the whole time I was doing this, I was slowly burning out and didn't even realize it. And for me, every time things got tough, I eventually learned that I hold the key within myself. Developing who I am as a human being, as a person, as a driver. So I had to learn to self-coach who I was in order to just make sense of the life that I was living and the choices that I was making. There were many times that I'd be going down the highway at night and somebody would be hollering on the CB, and I would have very, very personal and in-depth conversations with drivers that I never had a chance to meet. It was just voice to voice, and we would travel 20, 30, sometimes 200, 300 miles together and never met. Then there were the ones that I actually did stop. We'd stop for coffee or just something quick, and they would usually buy my coffee or I theirs, but it was a time that we just connected, and they would tell me thank you for helping me through that situation because they were dealing with something tragic at home, a breakup or a cheating situation or a financial problem that they were dealing with. And I just gave them the right advice. I was just that listening ear for them. And that revealed to me, after I kept seeing this, after the years and years and miles, that people would tell me things, that's my zone of genius. I'm wired to help people and also companies who are struggling and offer them a different picture of their current perspective and current situation of where they are finding themselves. I'm deeply passionate about the craft of being a professional truck driver. And that's what I want to try to give you a little bit here today as part of this. Today I'm a transformational coach, and I work with trucking companies, with their leadership teams, to help them build a driver-centered culture that actually keeps good drivers and helps to protect the revenue of the company. Because as I said earlier, when you're switching out drivers, it gets pretty costly, and we're going to see that on the next slide here. Oh, went the wrong way. So that's a little bit about who I am, and this is what we're going to be covering here today. Understanding why drivers leave. I want you to not just know that they're leaving. Most of the time we think it's because of pay, and that has a little bit to do with it, but usually there's deeper emotional and relational patterns that I've been able to identify over the years that surface during these times when drivers decide to leave and go for another company, and we'll look at that a little bit. I want you to be able to see what the turnover is actually costing you and your company. Not just the recruiting dollars, but the ripple effect that goes out from that driver leaving and how it affects your safety within your company, what it causes for the dispatchers, the HR individuals, and your reputation out there on the road, because drivers will talk. If one company's treating them well, they're going to tell that good news out there to the other drivers. If somebody gets treated poorly, they're going to share that just as quickly too. So you want to make sure that you're protecting your revenue and also your reputation out there on the road. I want us to look at some of the key levers that can help you to keep your drivers more consistently on board and bought into what it is you're trying to accomplish as a company. And ultimately, I want you to be able to walk away with a framework that you can build on. This is an actual system that you can implement and refine over time and use it for however your company is designed to run. Once you get started with these applications and putting these things in place and learn how to use them, you're going to be able to retain the drivers that you want to keep and let others go that you definitely have conflicts with, and know that it's going to be okay. I want you to be able to influence on purpose the situation where you find yourself. So what does it cost when you have a driver leave? If you do a quick Google search, you can kind of get this information. That's part of where this came from. Plus, I've also looked at some of the companies that I do work with, and they echo some of what's going on here. Now, when I started driving in the 90s, there was a saying going around the industry, drivers, they're a dime a dozen. I don't like this one, I'll get another one. And some of that mentality is still out there today, but there's so much more training that goes along with today's drivers. So you can't maintain that drivers are a dime a dozen mentality, because of the special qualities that are needed and special training that goes along with just sitting behind the wheel. Sometimes you have to have training to operate tow motors, forklifts at some of the facilities. You have to be specially trained with some of the equipment that's on these trailers. So it goes beyond just steering the wheel as you're going down the road. So if we look at just some of the most conservative numbers here that you see on this screen, when I get the right screen here, I keep going the wrong way. There we go. $10,000 is about the average that we're going to use. It's the low average because most companies tell me between $8,000 and $20,000 to replace a driver. So if we use 10,000, and if you're a big enough company and you replace 25 drivers as an average every year, you're looking at $250,000 just to replace those 25 drivers. If you're a bigger company, or if you happen to have a bad luck and bad run of things and you go through 50 drivers, that's $500,000. That's $500,000. Not to mention the risk to your safety score out there, service failures that get missed, PMs that get missed, dispatcher burnouts, and the hit to your reputation that I talked about earlier. And like I said, drivers will talk. If there's good things going on, they're going to let others know. But if they're mistreated or things going poorly on in their company, they're going to let that be shouted from the rooftops, if you will. So retention isn't just a people problem. It's something that affects your bottom line, your safety score, and the culture of being a professional truck driver all at once. Those dollars that you see on the screen, $250,000 or $500,000, those are symptoms. Underlying this are the emotional and relational and lifestyle pressures that come with being a driver, affecting them and their families. And that's what I feel we need to work on and start to address. So when drivers leave, usually the conversations I have with them go beyond just the pay issue. And in some situations, pay is the issue. So I'm not by any means saying pay needs to drop, pay needs to increase. That always makes everybody happy. But when I talk to drivers, what you see here on this slide is usually some of the excuses that I hear and reasons that they give. They're tired of being treated like a truck number. You know, they're just seen as, hey, here's the load, you need to haul it. You're the only one in the area. We don't have anybody else. The company has to make money. My dispatcher doesn't listen. They don't care. I told them on Monday I need to be home on Thursday because my daughter has a play that she wants to do. And I told her I would be there. You promised me on Monday it would work. Now here we are, Thursday afternoon, it's not working in my favor. I'm going to miss another one. My family gets frustrated because of too many of those empty promises, because things do happen out there on the road. And nobody really cares about me until I decide to say, you know what, I've had enough, I quit. Or I'm not taking this run, I'm going to take an extra day off at the house. What's the company to do? Now understand that these feelings that are on the screen here, they just don't appear out of nowhere. They're built on the daily reality of what it is to be a driver on the road. Talked a little bit about these. So what is it to be like out there on the road? Some of you know firsthand. Others of you may be new to trucking. You're going to have time where you're not going to be able to be home for those precious moments. I miss my daughter's first steps walking. Both of my daughters, to be honest. I missed those steps. I missed her first words. But as she got older and I was able to take her out with me, there was a lot of things that I got to enjoy. But you miss those birthdays. You miss those celebrations. I've missed funerals. I've missed ball games, school plays, sporting events, the typical Tuesday night dinner that I was always accustomed to having. But the important thing is I've lived through each of those sacrifices. Yeah, I was upset when it was happening, and I may have lost my cool at times, but it didn't ruin who I was. In fact, it kind of shaped who I became and who I am today. When you're out there on the road, sleep isn't like it is when you're at home. Pull into a nice, quiet truck stop, and all of a sudden the guy next to you pulls in. A couple hours later, you're nice and asleep, and he's got a loud reefer coming on. Kicks in the middle of the night, right? We know about it. Or you're in a rest area, nice and quiet. You happen to be on one of those side slots as you're coming in because all the other parking slips are full. And here he comes, Billy Big Rigger coming down through, running that Jake, all the way down. You're awake again. So you never get the right amount of sleep when you're out there on the road a lot. So you're constantly got pressure coming from everywhere. Your dispatcher wants to know, Are you going to be on time? Are you going to make the load? Are you being safe out there? Are you being efficient? And all this while still trying to remain like a human being. You get done with your tour, whether it's a day, a week, 2-3 weeks, a month, you come home, you're exhausted. You're glad to be there, but at the same token, you just drove 500 miles to get here, to be home, to enjoy your days off. Your family is hoping that you're going to be that normal individual, but you don't feel normal in the least. You start asking yourself, who sees me doing this and the sacrifice that I'm making? Does anybody really have my back when I'm out there? And this is often where companies sometimes miss the mark. Safety, our dispatchers, our driver managers, and even HR, they're stretched really thin also. They're juggling coverage with the loads. They're looking at customer demands. They're looking at safety, and they're also got this new revolving door of new faces and new drivers that they have to keep training and put through to replace the other drivers that have left because of poor driver retention. If we don't find a way to support people in safety, people doing the dispatching, how do we expect them to support our drivers in an effective way? So I feel in order for us to improve driver retention, we need to look at 2 levels here and work on them both at the same time. So I've developed a system and a culture that you can create as leaders, number 1, and number 2, give drivers internal tools and your dispatchers also a process of dealing with stress that comes from the job, an opportunity to learn how to ground themselves and stay connected to the real reason why they are doing the job that they're doing. And that's the framework I'm going to walk us through today. Framework I call Retention from the Cab Framework. In this, it's made up primarily of 3 parts: seeing the human for who they are, supporting the relationship around that human being, whether it's the family or the dispatcher, or people they encounter out there on the road, and then give them tools to strengthen their inner tools for themselves. How do they stay calm when they're under pressure, when they have that near miss out there on the road? What do drivers have to get through and cope with those situations? Oftentimes, they don't realize what they're capable of being able to do for themselves unless they're shown. And I didn't know for the longest time what I needed to do to calm myself down in some near-miss situations. Now, this is just a glimpse of what is possible today, but I want you to just kind of think about these things and see what shifts in your mind as we kind of open this up and look at this from this directive. So if you pull these 3 levers that are here that we're going to delve into, you can find that you can have calmer dispatcher interactions. You'll have fewer surprise resignations or people just quitting in general. And you'll find that drivers actually will enjoy coming to work and they'll want to stay with the company because they are treated well. So the first thing I want us to see is see the human. That sounds pretty basic because we look at each other and we're like, yeah, we see there's a human being. But what does that mean? That's like saying, yeah, there's a Cummins engine. What does that mean? Look at all the components that go with it. We're human beings. We're complex. And if you've sat in on some of the other seminars, you've learned how complex we are. Just before, they were talking about, preventative maintenance on yourself. You perform preventative maintenance on an engine, you need to do the same for you. So how do you care for you? Drivers generally don't quit over having one bad day. They quit after feeling invisible for far too long. They think they don't matter. They think what they want isn't important to their dispatchers and to the company. In most fleets, every time there's a dispatcher-driver interaction, it's about one thing: freight. And when you're going to get it there. Don't be late. Adjust your schedule. Do what you need to do. How much time's left on your clock? Metrics. Go, go, go. That's all the driver hears. But I've developed a conversational framework to empower and to give to dispatchers that goes beyond just worrying about the freight all the time. When you have that interaction with the driver, you need to ask them, how are things going with you? And how many of us, by a show of hands, if your dispatcher were to say, hey, how are you doing, would be like kind of surprised, like, oh, somebody really cares? But that's what I think is going to make a difference. That would have made a huge difference for me for my years on the road. Now, I was only ever a company driver. I had good dispatchers. I had bad dispatchers. But my good dispatchers were the ones that said, hey, Dave, what's going on at home? How's the family doing? It made me feel like, wow, why do you want to know what's going on? But it made me feel good that they were even considering asking me how things are going at home. So just having a small, intentional, human moment goes a long way. And those moments made me feel seen and heard and even appreciated by my dispatcher. So when dispatchers stop treating drivers like a number and see who they are beyond that person in that truck, it goes a long way for the driver. Drivers will begin to open up sooner. If they have a problem, they're more willing to come to the dispatcher and say, hey, I've got this conflict coming up. I got this schedule issue that I'm dealing with. And they'll talk about it. But if they don't, and you don't give them the opportunity to open up, they're going to keep it to themselves. It's going to grow, and it's going to rub, and eventually it's going to blow up, and then people are going to get hurt feelings, and those are the things that cause people to quit. How many times have we been on the phone with our dispatcher? I know nowadays a lot of things is via text, and text is probably one of the worst things because you can't hear tone in text. But you get angry in those situations. You know, just dispatcher wants you to do something, and you're like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't have enough time. And they tell you to take it anyway. We'll figure it out. They just want to get things covered on their end. And that, at the end of the day, drivers just want to be seen and heard just like everybody else. And dispatchers, I know, want to get the job done. And for them, it's just a check mark. Okay, we got the load covered. The driver will figure it out. And oftentimes we do. We get pretty creative out there, don't we? But that's the thing I want us to remember, and I want the dispatchers to just really focus on. I have a conversational framework that I teach dispatchers to use with the drivers that goes beyond just getting the load there and whether or not it's going to be late. And it helps drivers feel important and valued for who they are. That takes me on to the second lever, supporting the relationship around that driver. Now, retention, I feel, can be either broken or built between a dispatcher, the dispatcher and their families, and leadership within the companies. That's a very, very tender balance that needs to be walked there. So as a coach, one thing I am trained to do is to notice patterns. Sometimes I need that, and I need to see it a few times because I could be slow sometimes. But here's what I see over and over again. There's the expectations of the drivers and the expectations of the dispatcher. Sometimes the driver's here and the expectations of dispatch is here. They don't line up. There's miscommunication. Communication gets vague. It gets sloppy. Resentment begins to build. And eventually, people are hurt. They're not seen. They're not appreciated. And they get PO'd. And that's when they start to walk. You've probably seen it in your own companies. You probably have heard it with other fellow drivers. When conflict hits, and we always know that it will in some fashion, dispatchers, safety people, HR, you've got the ability to either pour gasoline on that fire, or you can implement some of my conversational techniques and lower that temperature and keep people at the table. It's just like a negotiation. As long as you can keep people at the table having a conversation, you have the ability to get things solved where everybody mutually understands and is willing participants to help get the job done. So this is what I train the dispatchers and the drivers on. I take that traffic controller hat off and put on that of a coach. Coaches are good at reframing and listening and asking probing questions. And that's what I love most about being a coach, being able to work with people. It helps you to feel seen and heard and appreciated. And when you as a driver are seen and heard and appreciated, chances are you're not going to ghost your dispatcher. You're not going to wig out on a load. You're going to do what you need to do, and you're going to go the extra mile. And companies have seen I quits drastically reduced. People are willing to do that. One thing that companies can do is be very clear on what your home time means. Is it just the 34-hour reset, or is it 48 hours? Can it be extended? I always loved having that extra day at home with my family, but too many times I would roll in on a Saturday morning after I just ran the last 300 or 400 miles to get home, 6 hours later than I was expected to be there, but I was still already under a load that I still needed to leave on Sunday at a certain time by, so I had to figure out how to adjust things to work it in my favor. It was exactly 34 hours, and I don't feel that's enough time to be at home with my 2 daughters and my wife at the time. I wanted that extra day, but the load demanded that I couldn't get it. So having a clear agreement about what home time looks like, I think, is a good example for dispatchers to follow and to use that as an opportunity to remind the driver, hey, if you take this load, it's only going to give you this much time at the house. Is that good with you? If the dispatcher is the first one to present that, it helps to build trust in that relationship. If they don't, the dispatcher gets the load covered, but resentment's going to build in that driver because now they just realize they took that load and they're going to be punched or crunched for time on the other end. Doing things for the driver's family, having days at the office or picnics, do things for the family. Young families new to driving have no idea the strain that gets placed on relationships when you're out there on the road, when you just want to kind of see someone when they're physically not able to be there. Now, today's day and age, we've got cell phones, we've got computers, we've got Zoom. That definitely has made a huge difference over time. But back when I was driving in the 90s, you had to stop at a truck stop at a particular time, find a pay phone or a phone at the table where you were, and you prearranged that hopefully you could call with your credit card. It was an 800 number that you called to get the cheap rates, and that's how we used to do things. So much for that back in the day, but we've come a long ways with the convenience of modern technology. So staying in touch and staying connected is a lot easier nowadays. And that brings me to my third and final lever, strengthening the inner tools. Now, this is where my coaching and breathwork background comes into play. You can't remove every external pressure that is out there in this industry, but you can equip drivers, I feel, with tools that can help them to stay grounded. I use a simple seasonal framework. That's where I get the name of my company, Seasons of Life Coaching, because what you believe and what you see is simple. We have 4 seasons, spring, summer, winter, and fall, right? If we look at that and how it affects our lives, we see that we run life in a cycle. Wintertime is kind of hunkered down, it's survival mode. It may be a time to just shut down, take some time off before you burn out. Spring, that's the time of year we're in now. New possibilities, new hope, maybe some small changes. There's time of excitement because we've come out of that long winter. Summer, momentum is stability. Then we get to the fall, we have big changes. Drivers need to learn to be able to reset their nervous system after having those heated conversations or those near misses on the road. They need to be able to check in with themselves at the end of a day and reconnect with the why they are doing this in the first place. Our military teaches our soldiers box breathing. You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds at the top, you release it over a 4-second period, and then you don't breathe for 4 seconds, and you just continue to repeat that. That's a wonderful tool to give every one of our drivers as a means of calming themselves down. Repeating that cycle 4 to 5 times will bring your nervous system down and reset you. So when you apply these three levers, there's three things that you gain out of this. You're going to have fewer blindsided resignations. You're going to have calmer conversations in those tough moments with dispatch and drivers. And I have found that drivers have actually said, I feel like somebody is finally seeing me and somebody finally gets me. Retention stops being just a recruiting problem. It becomes a cultural advantage for the company. And remember, if we do the math, if you have the ability to keep and retain 5 to 10 extra drivers this year, you're saving $50,000 to $100,000 that you can reinvest in your people instead of your recruiting pipeline. Every driver that a company keeps is a story, a family, and a skill set that you don't have to rebuild from scratch. Retention from the cab up, I feel, honors the human being behind the wheel and designs a system around that reality. Staying consistent is the key in all of this. Now, I've thrown quite a bit out here, and just a few key shifts need to change. You don't need to re-implement and redesign the wheel. So there's just a few things that if you consistently do these, you're going to see a lot of great change within your company. See the human for who they are. When you do this, drivers feel noticed before they have an opportunity to go numb. Support the relationships around the driver. Conflict becomes something that you can navigate instead of something that blows up in the middle of your week when it's really inconvenient. And giving those drivers those inner tools and strengthen that driver gives the driver the ability to handle pressure without feeling like their only option is to just up and quit. Doing this, you're going to get fewer blindsided resignations, you'll have calmer conversations in those tough moments, and you'll have drivers actually saying, somebody finally sees me. Retention stops being a recruiting problem, and it becomes a cultural advantage for the company. In companies where drivers thrive, that's where your retention is increased. You're going to boost your company's reputation out there on the road, and you're going to protect your revenue because you don't have that influx of drivers in and drivers out. Here are some other keynotes and workshops that I have available for any companies that are interested. Retention from the cab up is this talk here that I'm doing today. I have a couple other keynotes listed there. I have custom options available to bring me in for speaking opportunities to talk more about this and other things that are specific to your company and to your situation. And that brings me to my final slide. So what I've shared today is just a framework and a taste of what's possible when you look at retention and you build it from the cab up and see that driver for the valuable professional that they are. In this is a lot of good things. If any of this resonates with you, your company, you know somebody that could use this information and this skill set and wants to be able to value their drivers that they have, I encourage you to go ahead and screenshot either of these QR codes on the left. I am a life coach and I do work individually, one-on-one with people. I know drivers inside and out. If that's something that is of interest to you, I'm available for those conversations. And on the right-hand side is for mainly companies and businesses. If you want to bring me in to work with your HR teams, dispatch, and also with your drivers. I do appreciate you all for being here. This has been an amazing expo here today. We've had good turnouts. I want to thank you for the work that you are doing, for the drivers that you do see and appreciate, and for being here on behalf of your drivers. That alone tells me the kind of leaders and drivers that we have in this industry that I'm so proud to be a part of. And with that, do we have any time left, or are we at time? I think we're good. Does anybody have any questions as we finish this up? All right. I am available if anybody wants to talk with me any further. I appreciate your time. Be safe in your travels home as we wrap up this expo here this year. And it was a pleasure to be here and serve you today. Thank you.